Okay, I need to talk about data centers because I think they're genuinely cool. One of my very first IT jobs was doing help desk at a data center. It's actually where I met my husband. He worked there for over 10 years, even managed a data center before joining the army. And there was just something so cool about the way that their cold rows were set up. They had these like cool great systems in the floor that felt like a catwalk. Like you were just walking down this cold row with lit servers on either side, blinking and beeping at you. And I legit felt like Darth Vader walking onto the bridge of a Star Destroyer. Like it was so much fun. You just like pull those doors open, just walk in, and you're just expecting to hear dun 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 dun. Yes, I'm a little weird, I know, but I do think data centers are cool and they get a weirdly bad rap recently. Partly, I think, from people who don't understand them, and partly from people who understand them maybe just enough to be wrong about them. And look, like, I get it. Building full of computers is not exactly a thrilling pitch, but stick with me because these things are fascinating and they are the reason the internet exists as a physical thing in the real world. They have a history that goes back further than most people realize, and almost everything scary you've heard about them is either outdated, exaggerated, or flat out wrong. Now, almost everything. We're going to address the elephant in the room, the AI bubble, because yes, there is an argument that AI investment is inflated and that a correction is coming, and that's fine. Totally valid conversation to have. But here's the thing, right? Spoiler, even if every AI company went broke tomorrow, data centers would still be here. They were here before AI was the next big thing. They'll be here long after because they're not an AI thing. They're an internet thing. So let's actually talk about what these buildings are, what they do, the pros and the cons, and what's real versus what's noise. And don't worry, we'll get to noise. Okay, so people treat data centers like they're a Silicon Valley invention from the last decade. And they're not. The ancestor of the modern data center is ENIAC, built in 1945 at the University of Pennsylvania. It filled an 1,800 square foot room, weighed 30 tons, used 18,000 vacuum tubes, and consumed about 150 kilowatts of power for one machine. And from day one, the engineers had to think about climate control because, of course, electronics generate heat, and heat melts electronics. That's a constraint that just has still not changed to this day. It just scales, right? Through the 50s and 60s, mainframes, those big kind of refrigerator-sized computers, needed their own dedicated rooms with controlled temperatures, raised floors for cable management, and restricted access. The idea of a special place where computers live is older than the microwave oven being a household appliance. The 90s dot-com boom is where things really accelerated. Every company suddenly needed servers for their website. Internet service providers needed infrastructure for email and dial-up connections. A whole industry of co-location facilities just spun up. Buildings where companies could rent rack space instead of building their own server rooms. And when the bubble burst in 2001, a lot of that infrastructure didn't disappear. It got absorbed, consolidated, and kept running because the internet didn't stop existing just because the investment money dried up. So all of those servers, all of the computers that were running and being hosted in those data centers, that's what built the internet. That's what we have today. And that leads us to cloud computing, which came in 2010s, and that fundamentally changed the entire model. Because instead of every business running its own hardware, you rent compute from Amazon Web Services, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, etc., etc. And the data centers became much larger, much more efficient, and much more concentrated. And now in the 2020s, AI workloads, which are genuinely more compute intensive than standard web traffic, just kicks off another wave of construction. But here's the point I want to make really clearly. AI accelerated the growth. It didn't create the need. We have cloud services. Those are hosted somewhere and it's all at the data center, okay? Now, every bank transaction, every GPS route calculation, every time a streaming service figures what to recommend to you, every video call, every cloud save, every time your phone packs up your photos, all of that is reaching out to a data center somewhere. These buildings are the physical substrate of the internet. They're not a trend, they're infrastructure, and infrastructure doesn't disappear because the hype cycle moves on. And the most common scary claim about data centers is that they are quote unquote draining our rivers. It's a very vivid image, and it also doesn't actually hold up when you look at the real numbers. All US data centers combined account for roughly 0.5% of total national fresh water consumption. Agriculture uses hundreds of times that. Thermoelectric power generation, including the plants that power your house, uses significantly more. This is not a rounding error here. Data centers are genuinely not a major player in national water consumption by any reasonable measure. There's a metric researchers use called water per token, and basically that just means how much water goes into processing a unit of AI output. When you actually run the numbers, a single cheeseburger has a water footprint equivalent to running something like 2.7 billion AI tokens. You would have to use AI tools for hours every single day for years to approach the water costs of a fast food lunch. Like, I'm not saying this to be dismissive of water conservation generally. I'm saying the data centers framing is directing attention at the wrong target. Now, where does the fear come from, though? Well, it does come from a valid and understandable place, because older generation data centers used what was called evaporative cooling. Same principle as sweating, right? You spray water, it evaporates, and the evaporation carries the heat away. It works great. It also consumes water in a way that's genuinely measurable at the local level. If you have an older evaporative cooling facility in a drought-stressed region like Utah, that's a legitimate thing for that specific community to care about. But the industry has been moving hard away from this. Liquid cooling is now more of the standard, where coolant circulates through closed loops directly in contact with the hardware. It's becoming the standard for new high-density facilities, and in a closed-loop system, the water doesn't evaporate, it circulates and it gets reused. And the most advanced facilities are now claiming water positive status, meaning through rainwater harvesting and recycled water systems, they actually put more back into local supplies than they draw. Is some of that marketing? Sure. Audit those claims, read the environmental impact assessments, but the underlying shift is real and it's happening fast. By 2026, the majority of new AI optimized data center builds are expected to use liquid cooling as the primary cooling method. The water hog narrative is based on infrastructure that is increasingly being retired. Now, this next one I want to address directly because it comes up a lot, and I actually think this is based on a category error, and that is the AI bubble. Yes, there are legitimate arguments that current AI investment is inflated, that valuations are ahead of demonstrated revenue. This is nothing new. We talk about this all the time on this channel. We're in a hype cycle that will eventually correct, and all that is definitely true. The history of tech is full of bubbles that eventually popped. The dot-com crash, the early mobile app boom, early crypto cycles, corrections happen. But here's what the dot-com crash actually looked like for internet infrastructure. It didn't go away. Amazon survived it and built AWS. Google survived it and became the search backbone of the internet. The servers that powered all those failed dot-com companies got purchased out of bankruptcy and kept running for other purposes. The physical infrastructure of the internet doesn't dissolve just because investment sentiment changes. And the same logic will apply now. If AI investment corrects, and it most likely will, you know what still needs data centers? We've already said it. Every bank, every hospital, every logistics company, every government agency, every streaming service, every retail business with an online presence. The current AI build-out, yes, it is adding capacity to a system, but that system was already capacity constrained before AI became mainstream. A pullback in AI-specific investment doesn't create a surplus that makes data centers irrelevant. It just means some of the most aggressive growth projections aren't going to fully materialize. And any of them that are struggling, let's be real, AWS or Google will buy them up. Meta will probably also buy them up for pennies on the dollar. They're not going away. Data centers are not a bet on AI. They are a bet on the internet continuing to exist, which feels like a pretty safe bet to me, guys. All right, so let's be fair, because I did say pros and cons, and I meant it. There are some real cons, and as much as I love data centers, I think they're really cool, we need to talk about some of these cons. First is going to be the noise, because the noise is real. A data center is not a quiet neighbor. It's a building running thousands of industrial fans and cooling systems continuously every hour of every day. And the specific problem isn't volume, it's actually a low frequency noise. The deep constant hum that standard residential construction doesn't block very well. It goes through walls, through windows, and because it's persistent rather than intermittent, it genuinely disrupts sleep and creates chronic stress for the people living close to it. This isn't a made-up concern either. Low-frequency industrial noise has documented health effects, and it's easy for a developer to technically pass a noise ordinance while still creating a hum that makes the nearby neighborhood pretty miserable, because standard decibel measurements don't capture that low-frequency impact very well. The fix is actually pretty simple in concept, which would be siting. Like, don't put these things next to residential areas. Keep industrial facilities in industrial zones with real buffers. The problem is that when developers are chasing cheap land and fast permitting, the sensible industrial zone sometimes loses out to whatever's possible. That's a zoning and planning conversation communities should be having before the permits get approved, not after. Next is going to be the grid cost. A large hyperscale data center can pull as much electricity as a mid-sized city. When a utility has to build out new substations and transmission infrastructure to support their load, that capital cost has to be recovered somewhere. And in a lot of jurisdictions, it gets spread across the existing ratepayer base, meaning residential customers end up seeing their bills go up to fund infrastructure that primarily serves a commercial facility. Is that only a data center problem? No, large industrial facilities of all kinds create this dynamic, but the scale of the current build out is big enough that it's showing up meaningfully in rates in some regions. And the argument that the entity creating the demand should fund the capacity upgrades needed to meet it is not unreasonable. And it's a conversation state utility commissions are starting to have in places like Virginia, Texas, and Georgia, where the concentration of data center builds is highest. So that's good. And then you have diesel backup generators. Hear me out here, because every facility promising high has a diesel backup generator. It's kind of a non-negotiable at the moment, because if the grid goes down, those machines cannot go down. And to verify they'll actually work, they get tested fairly regularly. And when they run, whether in testing or in an actual grid event, they emit particulate matter and nitrogen oxides. And for most people at most distances, the impact of periodic testing is pretty minor. But for communities close to a facility, especially communities that already have an air quality challenge from other sources, our air is crappier, it can kind of add to the cumulative burden. And the industry, to be fair, is moving toward cleaner engine standards and exploring alternatives like hydrogen fuel cells. The big operators have made public commitments on timelines, and whether those commitments get met is worth watching, but the direction of travel is real. So, I mean, here's kind of where I land on this. Data centers, full stop, are just cool. I'm sorry. I'm a nerd. I'm weird. I think they're cool. I like feeling like Darth Vader when I go into work. And they are the physical backbone of the internet, a technology that has genuinely improved human life in measurable ways. And they have a history stretching back to the 1940s that most people don't know about. Did you know about it? I thought it was pretty cool to learn about that. The AI wave, yes, it's a thing, and that's kind of what brought data centers into the conversation, but it's not the whole story, and it's not what makes them worth caring about. They'd be essential infrastructure even if AI had never become a thing, but you might know about them a little less, I guess. The water fears, mostly outdated, and the numbers don't support the national scale draining rivers narrative, even for older technology. Liquid cooling is the present and future of the industry, not a PR promise. The real cons of the noise for nearby residents, grid cost distribution, diesel emissions during, transition periods are legitimate and worth taking seriously, but none of them are arguments against data centers existing. They're arguments for building them thoughtfully, siting them sensibly, and making sure the cost of the infrastructure they require doesn't fall entirely on the people who didn't even ask for it. So these things are part of our world. They're not going anywhere, so might as well understand them a little bit and make sure that if you want to have conversations around data centers or try to push for legislation or more transparency, that you do it in the right way about the right issues, the right cons. Anyway, links to the water studies and the infrastructure reports and analyses, I'll put those in the descriptions below for you, but go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments. How much of this did you know? Did any of this change how you think about data centers? Are you also weird like me, where you kind of like feeling like Darth Vader, or you just think they're cool? Like I am curious what people's actual perceptions are about data centers. If you like this video, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you like technology and AI conversations and software development with a little bit of gaming mixed in, I'd love to have you here. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. But fair warning for you guys, if you don't subscribe, I might just be forced to banish you to the Shadow Realm.
No, much better.
That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have just the most fantastic rest of your day, and peace out.